Now, the Orioles obviously getting busy for an off-season, and let's welcome in Roch Kubatko from MASNsports.com School of Rock. You can check him out there on a daily basis covering the Orioles. And Roch, I know just about every reporter around believes that Wei-Yin Chen will not be back with the Orioles for 2016. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I kind of revisited the topic this morning because I've been writing as much as anybody that of the 6 pending free agents, he's the least likely to re-sign. But I felt like I still needed to point out a few things. It's not like it's absolutely impossible. And I say this because, for one thing, I know that owner Peter Angelos would like to re-sign Chen. I've heard that from a couple people, very reliable sources. So I believe that. Now, that doesn't mean, okay, record-breaking contract, and this guy could end up getting a 5-year deal. So eventually he could price himself out of Baltimore. But there is that interest in hanging on to him. It's not like it's being dismissed right now. We're not going to be able to do this, so we're not even talking about it. Believe me, it's being talked about. I'm sure everybody would like to have him back. So I'm not ready to completely dismiss it. And also, the rotation is the number one concern of this team. Despite all the other things, the possibility of Chris Davis leaving, et cetera, the number one priority is strengthening the rotation. And he was the most consistent starter. He had the lowest ERA among the starters. He had the most innings pitched. And that punches a pretty big hole, and he's the only left-handed starter they have. So there are a lot of reasons why I would expect him to make an aggressive play to try and keep him. Now, the 6 pending, I still think the odds are lowest with him, but it's certainly not impossible, and things can always change.
Roch, if the Orioles do lose Wei-Yin Chen, would you think that the replacement would have a better chance coming from inside or outside the organization?
Well, I know they're looking to add a starter for the top of the rotation anyway. I think that's the case no matter what happens with Chen. So I guess it depends whether we're talking about replacing Chen or whoever's going to come in as that maybe 1 or 2 starter to kind of pair with Chris Tim at the top of the rotation. There aren't a lot of in-house options at this point as far as, again, if you're looking for another left-hander, Chris Jones is a AAA, but he never got the call up here. There's, questions about whether his stuff would play at this level. I think they're more apt to go ahead, at least and try and go outside the organization. And again, they could be bringing in multiple starters. Who knows? I mean, they're going to go ahead and sign other minor league free agents and check the waiver wire. But they are going to make a play to try and bring in a bigger name starting pitcher. Again, how much they're willing to spend. So definitely they're going to look outside the organization. I know it ties into today's Royals Blue Jays game. The Buck really likes Chris Young, and that's a guy you're going to hear the Orioles link to him in whatever capacity. He's pitched out of the bullpen. He's been a starter. I'm not saying he's the number 1 guy, but as long as we're watching the playoffs today, keep that name in mind because Buck really does like him.
Roch, along those lines, I mean, Chris Young, Vance Worley, who they picked up on waivers today, kind of similar situations. Not number 1 or number 2 guys, or for that matter, number 3 or 4 guys, probably back end of the rotation type guys, or swing men. They already kind of have that in TJ McFarland. They probably have that in Tyler Wilson if they want. Maybe even a Mike Wright, probably a couple other guys in the mix. What are you seeing here? A little depth move maybe, and then maybe a guy who may not even make it onto the spring training roster if other moves are made?
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those early kind of depth moves, and they do this every year. I was kind of joking to myself that I liked Vance Worley the first time I saw him when he was Josh Stinson. I mean, it's basically, it could be that type of move, and a guy who's got experience starting. He's been a reliever. He's on the 40-man now. There's no guarantee he's going to stay on it. I would expect them to bring him to camp. But again, you're right. If they end up in some kind of a crunch, he could be vulnerable. He doesn't have options, but he is arbitration eligible for the next 3 years. He's under team control until 2019, but he is out of options. So, we'll see. But in the meantime, it is a depth move. And I knew as soon as I mentioned today, there were going to be fans saying, "Oh, start putting the World Series tickets. This was the big winner move." And it isn't. To me, I look at it as, no offense to Jorge Rondon, but this is an upgrade. It was a 40-man kind of swap. Rondon comes off it, and Worley comes on it, and Worley is a better pitcher. I think he's got a better chance to contribute than Rondon does. That's all that this is right now. And then we'll see from there. But Worley right now is a guy that they're just looking at, hey, a lot of upside. He was 3rd Rookie of the Year voting in 2011. What did we, 11-3 with the Phillies that year? There are things they like about him. At this point right now, take a look at him. But let's see if he makes it into camp, if he makes it through camp.
Well, while we're on the subject of pitching, I know that all the coaches have been offered contracts for 2016, and a few coaches have accepted and have signed. Dave Wallace, the pitching coach, however, has not. And if he opts to go elsewhere, does Dom Chidi move into that slot, or might possibly Mike Griffin? Can they finally decide that he's paid enough dues in the minor leagues?
Well, I guess those are both possibilities. I've confirmed that 4 of them are definitely signed for next season, and John Russell actually has a 2-year deal that he signed last month. Somehow that kind of fell through the cracks. We didn't even know that. Sheedy has signed for 2016, so it's my assumption that it is to return as a bullpen coach. And last time I talked with somebody in the organization, they were very confident that Dave Wallace was staying. It's just interesting that it's kind of dragged out this much. Same with Wayne Kirby. I thought, he's already been talked to about coming back, and he's all for it. I'm not sure why this hasn't gotten done. I asked Dan Duquette today, and he said they've made a lot of progress, but there probably wouldn't be an announcement today. So you could get something tomorrow or the next day. But Wallace is the one that I think there was concern initially that they were going to lose him. And then I started hearing up until Friday that the real concern was about Sheedy, that he could end up getting an offer to be a pitching coach somewhere as opposed to being the bullpen coach here, and they could lose him. It turned out that was the guy more than anybody that they started to worry about. They do have him under contract.
Roch, out of the list of free agents that the Orioles have, and when you think for a moment about the priority of signing them, let's just remember last year they signed J.J. Hardy actually in between the playoffs and never really let him hit the market. Do you see the Orioles making an offer, or maybe not so much an offer, but maybe getting a contract deal done with any one of the 6 before free agency starts?
Well, I mean, I could see that happening, at least the attempts being made. Now, certainly, I wouldn't expect any of the Boris clients to do that, but I would expect them to try and make an aggressive push for Darren O'Day before he hits the market. We've talked about this before. You could start rattling off the number of teams that are going to go after him hard as a setup man and maybe even as a closer if he hits the market. And I just off the top of my head, you could immediately say the Tigers. You could look at the Nationals that would be looking at him. So I think that they're going to try and get something done. And a guy like Steve Pearce might be an easier one. I don't know how much of a demand is going to be for Steve. The numbers were down this year, but they still really like him. He's versatile. He's a favorite of Bucks. It's a nice right-handed bat to have off the bench that you can plug in a couple different spots. So he may not be that difficult to re-sign. But I think O'Day is the one more than anybody that they really need to be aggressive with because, again, his price is just going to go up. We could be looking at him easily getting a 4-year deal somewhere.
Well, Roch, as always, we appreciate the information. Enjoyed the conversation. Look forward to seeing you Saturday on Wall to Wall Baseball from noon till 2 right here on MASN.
Thanks, guys.
All right, Roch Kubatko covering the Orioles on a daily basis for MASNsports.com, always with the latest information.